What's up, Fight Freaks? Welcome to my second live stream on this wonderful Twitch channel. 5 follows already since the first stream last week. Thank you very much, guys, for joining the channel. Small steps until we take over the world. Thank you very much for your support. Another live stream this morning. It is 7:30 a.m. in Germany. Already awake. And we're going to talk about the topics that came up in the last couple of days. Last week we talked about Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury, a possible boxing match between those two. And the talks of this fight are still not over. Actually, it's the other way around. They are getting more and more precise, to be precise. And it looks like Top Rank Promotion, the promoter of Tyson Fury, seems to be very interested in a fight like this. I believe it was yesterday, I read on Twitter, we can see right here, by the great Adam Stern, who said Top Rank is open to doing a co-promotion with UFC for a Tyson Fury Francis Ngannou boxing MMA crossover fight. Per Todd Dubuff, who's one of the head staff over at Top Rank, who does the media stuff there, who told SPG that negotiations could be made easier by both properties having their media rights tied to ESPN, meaning, of course, the UFC is exclusively tied to ESPN with their fight nights on ESPN Plus, and with the pay-per-views, they're sold over ESPN Plus as well, at least in the US. And Top Rank is putting on their shows on ESPN as well. So they are basically under the same umbrella, which definitely would make it easier to co-promote a fight because you don't have to negotiate with different networks. But this is still something that I believe, and this is something I didn't touch on last week. Last week I was talking about the technical aspect and the athletic aspect of the fight itself, and how how it doesn't make any sense to put on that fight because Francis Ngannou will get smoked in the first round. That's what I was saying last week. And this is, by the way, what most of the experts, so-called and real experts, saying on Twitter as well. But from a business standpoint, it doesn't really make any sense either, at least not for the UFC. I mean, of course it makes sense for Top Rank, because Tyson Fury would be a huge favorite, and this is something I read as well on Twitter. Tyson Fury would be a huge favorite in this fight. Of course, you can already bet on that thing. You can already bet on the possible fight. And Tyson Fury is a huge favorite. I will look up in a couple of minutes how big a favorite he is. And I mean, this is an easy fight for Top Rank. It will generate a lot of money. Their champion won't lose any belts because there won't likely be, a championship belt on the line or anything like that. And he won't lose credit either. No credibility either, because he will smoke the baddest guy from the UFC. So this would be a one-up in this whole boxing versus MMA conversation that, Top Rank CEO, what's his name, Bob Arum, is engaging in for years. He was always a vocal critic of the sport of MMA and always telling people how boxing is better and stuff like that. Would his best heavyweight beat the UFC's best heavyweight? This would be a one-up for him. So, and Dana White and the UFC, I mean, they have to know, and they do know. Trust me, they do know that Francis Ngannou doesn't have a chance in that fight. So why would they put on that fight? Sure, they want to make money, and there's a lot of money in this fight for sure. But they will lose their champion's credibility in the prize. I mean, imagine Francis Ngannou. Let's say he beats Cyril Gane in 2 weeks, right? He is the best heavyweight in the world, maybe even the best heavyweight ever. Who knows? And they will certainly build him up like that, right? the marketing machinery, the PR machinery, they will build Francis Ngannou up like he is the baddest motherfucker walking on earth. And then he goes in there against, the chubby looking Tyson. I mean, part of the success of Francis Ngannou is not just that he wins fights, because he has lost in the past, right? He lost against Derrick Lewis, for example. Part of his success and part of the reason why people love him and are fascinated so much by him is his backstory and his look, right? There's this poor kid from Africa who looks like a fucking machine, gets over to the to Europe and then to the US and fights his way up, to the heavyweight throne. This is a Hollywood story, man. And then and look just the way he looks, he's a fucking big black dude, muscular. He's a scary looking dude, and then he steps in there against a guy like Tyson Fury who looks like shit, and he gets killed in the first or second round. I mean, this would absolutely break his aura, this mythical aura that surrounds him. So the risk for the UFC is way higher, and to be honest, the investment for the UFC would be higher as well, because Top Rank, I mean, they have good talent on the roster and they're putting on, solid shows, for years, but they don't have the marketing machinery that the UFC has. I mean, the UFC is successful because they have a good business model. They have exciting fighters on their roster. They're putting on, great, evenly matched fights. But they also have a huge marketing apparatus that is unparalleled in combat sports and maybe even in sports in general. And this is something they've done right from the beginning, and when they pull that trigger, when they get that machine running, they can sell everything. They can sell everything. When they have those big shows in New York and I don't know, those stadium events and stuff like that, when they get that machine running, dude, there's nothing like it. So they would likely invest way more, on the marketing side and stuff. This is, these are all things that can be sorted out, in contracts, right? Where they say, all right, we're doing the bigger share of the marketing, so we're getting the bigger share, of the revenue and stuff. This is all something that lawyers can, sort out in contracts. But what you can't sort out in the contract is how Francis Ngannou loses his face, so to speak, by losing to Tyson Fury. And you can, of course, you can argue that even if he loses, you can still say, yeah, he went over into boxing. It's not his sport. He tried. He gave it his best shot, just like they did with Conor McGregor, right? He didn't lose any credibility in that Floyd Mayweather fight because everyone knew Floyd Mayweather was the best fucking boxer in the world at that time, still. And McGregor was, he was obviously one of the best MMA fighters, and he had a boxing background, but he wasn't a boxer, and he held his own until he got, stopped in the, I don't know, I believe it was the 8th or 9th round in 2017. But the thing is, and this is something I talked about with my colleague Andreas yesterday in my German podcast, Schlagwort podcast. By the way, you should, if you speak or even understand any German, you should absolutely follow the Fighting channel on YouTube, where you get provided with all things combat sport, and especially the German MMA scene. And I talked in the Schlagwort podcast with Andreas yesterday about the topic as well, and he was kind of astonished that I didn't like the fight, the Fury versus Ngannou. He was like, man, this is an interesting fight. Wouldn't you watch? Sure, I would watch. Of course, I would watch. It's my job for one. Second, I would be curious, of course. And he was like, it's heavyweight boxing, right? Anything can happen, Ngannou just needs to touch Fury once, and he can ground him. Yeah, that is true, but I believe he won't even touch him once. I don't think he will be I mean, he's a solid MMA striker, right? He has the power. He has, but he's not a boxer. I touched on that last week. Um, and my answer to Andreas was, I don't have anything against those fights in general, right? When Anderson Silva wanted to leave the UFC for a fight, a boxing match versus Roy Jones Jr., I was all for it because Anderson Silva has done anything and everything that can be done in the UFC, apart from maybe a champion versus champion super fight, which they didn't give him. So there was nothing left to do for him. He was toying with his opponents. He was running through them. He was knocking out everybody, even in higher weight classes. So there was basically nothing much left to do for him. So when he wanted to go out and box Roy Jones, I was all for it. Fight didn't happen, of course, but this would have been something, you know, that can be done. The Conor versus Mayweather thing, that was already another story because Conor was on top of the fucking world. He just won his second world title in the second weight class as the first guy ever. He was the first champ in the history of the sport, and or in the history of the UFC at least, and and he was in his fucking prime. And I believe that this Mayweather, I mean, he obviously made millions and millions of dollars, so this fight was a good choice for McGregor. But it wasn't a good choice for the fans because the fight itself, yeah, I mean, come on, it was a nice spectacle, but it wasn't right. I mean, it wasn't like the McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez fight, or the McGregor versus Jose Aldo fight, or the McGregor versus Khabib fight, where you couldn't wait to see this. It was a nice spectacle, but it wasn't as a fight fan. I wasn't really feeling it, to be honest. And this fight cost McGregor over a year in the UFC. He had the fight in New York 2016, where he beat Alvarez. Then he had the fight against Mayweather 2017, and then he went back and he had the Khabib fight in 2018. So he was gone from the UFC for almost 2 years, and this would have been the time where we could have seen all those huge fights, the McGregor versus Ferguson thing, when Ferguson was still Tony Ferguson, and a lot of other great fights. You could have put on so many good fights in those 2 years, and all these things were off the table because he was boxing Floyd Mayweather. And you know, the way I'm going, what I want to say is, when a fighter has done everything, has done it all, and he is in the later phase of his career, let him do those boxing exhibition shit. Why not, man? Let him make some money. Why not? But Francis Ngannou is in his fucking prime. Let's say he beats Cyril Gane in 2 weeks. He's on top of the fucking world. He is on top of the fucking mountain. And to see him leave just to box and quite possibly lose against Tyson Fury, I mean, come on. I don't want that. I want the big fights for Ngannou. I want the fight against Stipe. I want the fucking fight against John Jones. This is the fight I really want to see. I want to see John Jones come back as a fucking heavyweight. He looked humongous in those videos that he posted and all those pictures. And I want to see him fight Francis fucking Ngannou. That's what people want to see for, I don't know when those John Jones goes to heavyweight talks started, 1.5 years ago or something, almost 2 years. This is the fight everyone wants to see. I don't want to see Ngannou versus Fury. I want to see Fury versus Usyk. I want to see Fury versus fucking AJ. I want to see, fuck it, I don't know, Fury versus Dillian fucking White, whoever. But not against Francis Ngannou. Not yet. Not yet. All right. So much for that boxing thing. I hope this thing will be off the table in the next couple of weeks because, quite frankly, I think this is a topic that sucks. Oh, my hair looks shitty, by the way. Yeah, I'm just rolled out of bed, so sorry for that, guys. Another topic that came up a couple of days ago, or I believe it was yesterday as well. Man, those weekends are over fast. Yeah, it was. That was 3 days ago. It was Friday last week. Um, and it was posted first by the Dutch newspaper Telegraph, and obviously my Dutch is very bad, so we are happy to have great Twitter accounts like the Great and Powerful Beyond Kickboxing, who is, by the way, the best account for kickboxing news on Twitter. So if you're into combat sports or kickboxing in general, in particular, make sure you follow Beyond Kickboxing. The guy is really very very busy, and he puts on really exciting news and shit for the fans. He does his own rankings and stuff like that. So give him a follow and support the guy. And he made a post, you know, where he just used a quote from that Telegraph article, and this wasn't a misquoted kind of thing, or something that's put out of context or anything like that. This was a real quote by Scott Rudman, the executive vice president of Glory Kickboxing. And before I get into this topic, or you can already read it in the back. Before I get into this, I want to say I'm a huge fan of Glory. Glory puts on an incredibly inciting product. I watched all the shows, did commentary on a lot of them, and been a fan since day one. Glory is just the fucking shit. I love it. Right? Just wanted to get this out of the way. And the news said Glory won't be returning to the Netherlands anytime soon. And I was like, what? They have put on all the events they have put on in the last 2 or 3 years have been in Holland. They are based in Holland. Holland is, as we all know, a fucking hotbed for kickboxing, and I would imagine that this is their main market, right? I mean, they ventured into the U.S. and into France and Belgium and into Germany and other countries, but still, I mean, the Netherlands, I have to be their main market. So I was like, what? Why won't they return to the Netherlands anytime soon? And I mean, they already announced a show for, I believe it was Arnhem, during the last Glory event. So they already had, obviously, they had a venue booked, and they had plans to return, but now they won't anytime soon. And Scott Rudman told us why. He said, because what if one of our stars, I'm not laying hands on anyone, gets caught, and he means caught with performance enhancing drugs, and isn't allowed to fight for 4 years? What would we do then? That's an interesting take. Uh, just some bag info. Um, the Netherlands have, unlike many other countries, they have a combat sports authority, much like the Nevada State Athletic Commission that regulates the UFC fights, or the boxing commissions in the US in general that regulate the boxing and UFC events. The Netherlands have a commission like that too. It is called, I believe it's the Vechtsport, I don't know, association. I don't know what the name is really, but it's a combat sports association that oversees and regulates all the events that are put on in the Netherlands. And for those who don't know, it's not like everyone in the Netherlands loves kickboxing or loves combat sports. Um, there have been rough years for the sport in the Netherlands as well, because a couple of people had ties to crime or even organized crime. There have been shootings and killings, and you know people started to be a bit skeptical about the sport and some of the figures in that sport. And has nothing to do with Glory. I'm just painting the bigger picture here. So the authorities and the government in the Netherlands have become very, very strict when it comes to putting on events, who is fighting there, how are those, events organized, and basically what they want is a sport that is as clean as possible in every aspect, right? The background of the fighters, it has to be clean. The fighters themselves have to be clean. When it comes to performance enhancing drugs and stuff like that. So what they are doing starting this year is they are working together closely with a anti-doping association, and and yes, wait a minute, and I'm just looking for another statement where because or let's put it this way, they're working together with an anti-doping association, and as we all know, if you get caught, the association is able to ban a fighter for a certain amount of time. We have seen it in the UFC a lot of times. How long or the length of that ban, is depending on the severity of the violation, right? So, but what Scott Rudman is arguing is a 4-year ban is just too long, right? But with this quote, he obviously stirred up a lot of shit, and people were like, "What is he advocating for PEDs? And doesn't he want his roster to be clean? Doesn't he want a clean sport? And in kickboxing, it is almost criminal to use PEDs because you can hurt your opponent so much more." Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, 100% right. PEDs are not a good thing, and in combat sports, in particular, it's a very bad thing. But, but, if anyone thinks that combat sports worldwide and even in the UFC, all fighters are clean, or someday we, we will manage to have all fighters clean that are on a roster, you're delusional. You're fucking delusional. I mean, the UFC is working together with USADA, with the U.S. anti-doping agency, and they have the most stringent, strict, and regular testing in all of combat sports. I mean, I've seen it. I've been with guys in Vegas when the USADA team knocked on the door without, without information, without any information. They're just they're just around the corner, knock. Then you have to take a piss, and they are checking you for PEDs, and they are doing this regularly. You know, um, there are official registers. You can see them in the internet. You can see who is tested, how often, and what. It's the most sophisticated testing program you will ever find, and even there, people get popped regularly for serious shit, right? Imagine what is going on in what I call the second and third tier organizations, like the next level below the UFC, the Bellators and the KSWs and the one championships and what the fuck. I mean, and especially in kickboxing. Kickboxing is a sport where, in my opinion, performance enhancing drugs can help you even more than in MMA, for example, because it is especially. I'm talking about heavyweight kickboxing here. Heavyweight kickboxing is a sport that relies a lot on power, on stability, and tight upper body and stuff. So I think performance enhancing drugs can play a huge factor uh, in heavyweight kickboxing. So um, I think to believe that we will ever be able to clean this whole thing up is delusional. Still, we should try, right? And you're right about that. We should try. So I understand that a lot of people were upset because of the statement of Scott Rudman, and he later clarified what he meant exactly. And and he put out another statement, or at least the PR, PR staff put out a statement. It's quite a long statement, but I will read it for you. Uh, it reads: Glory has a generally very clean league. We support a clean sport and have very strict anti-doping policies. We are the only combat sports organization in the entire world, besides the UFC, that has anti-doping testing for athletes all at every event, and we have had this for many years all around the world, which is true. Which is true, and which is uh, a big accomplishment because this fucking steroid testing costs a lot of money. People are always like, well, why aren't you at steroid testing? And at those smaller shows here in Germany, people are like, what? You're not testing the fighters? No, we don't, because it fucking costs a lot of money. And to do that at every event is a huge accomplishment, but it makes it easy for PED users to get around it because you know you can schedule your cycle, your drug cycle, so to speak, so that when you know I'm going to be tested during fight week, they won't detect any traces in your blood anymore. So it is good to do that, but it's not the ultimate ratio. Um, we work with an organization called the ITA, which is a European anti doping group that, for example, works with Formula One and many other big sports. They are competent, independent, and well respected. And this is something that many people don't know. In Formula One, they're actually really using PEDs because it's, it is very hard on the body to drive a fucking Formula One car. The rules around doping are extremely complex and difficult. And now they are getting into the quote of Scott Rudman. Uh, the rules around doping are extremely complex and difficult. Athletes need training and support from a very young age to really enter a world where a 4-year ban for a first offense is possible. Typically, this training and support in Olympic sports comes from a National Olympic Committee, and athletes have access to this from a young age. The new rules in Holland would require us to fire the ITS and work with the government, Dutch doping authority, and they insist on a 4-year ban for an athlete for the first offense. This is designed for the Olympics and Olympic sports, not combat sports and a private sports league. Glory already has a 2-year penalty for a first offense, and we simply cannot go to a location where a silly mistake under complex rules could get an athlete banned for 4 years and destroy a career. It's not fair to athletes. We wish the Dutch doping authorities would pick up the phone and talk with us about a very successful anti doping program instead of trying to force Glory athletes to follow rules that don't make sense. And you know what? They are fucking right. They are absolutely right. I mean, obviously, no one is for performance enhancing drugs. They are a bad thing. Of course they are. But does that mean you can't criticize an anti doping program? I mean, what they are writing in this press release, and what Scott Rudman was touching on in his quote in the Telegraph newspaper was what kind of punishment is reasonable for a first offender, because and we have seen this in the UFC as well, and we had big discussions over PED penalties in the I mean, think about what they did with Nick fucking Diaz because of fucking weed. He got a lifetime ban because he was a multiple time offender. And there are guys, there are guys who obviously do the juice, and they get half a year, maybe 2 years, depending on if it's the first time or the second time they call him, and how much traces have been found in his body and stuff like that. But 4 years is a long time, and I don't know. I mean, they are obviously talking about an exclusively Dutch doping authority, kind of like a newly formed association that works with the government or that is part of the government. At least this is what this press release sounds like. And they're insisting on a 4-year ban for a first time offender. And, and what they are saying in this press release is true. I mean, this can make sense for an Olympic athlete because the best way to punish a PED user who's working towards or training towards the Olympic Games is banning him from the Olympic Games. And they are taking place every 4 years, of course. So this is why this 4-year ban can make sense for an Olympic athlete. But for a kickboxer, for a professional kickboxer, to be banned for 4 years can mean his career is over, right? I mean, we all know that the prime that a fighter has is not more than 2, 3, 4 years where they are on top, and then they start to fade again. Imagine you get caught with some shit, and when you start to reach your prime, and then you get banned for 4 fucking years. Your fucking career's over. And yeah, critics can always say, yeah, then he shouldn't take anything, and then this won't happen. Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. Don't take some shit, and you won't get banned. But, and this is something that they touched on in this press release as well, those anti-doping laws are very, very complex and very, very difficult, and in some cases, a bit stupid, to be honest. I just said it. Nick Diaz got banned for weed in the U.S. Now it's fucking legal to smoke weed, but it was still, and even when it was legal to smoke weed in most states, it was still on the USADA's doping list. Now they crossed it. They scratched it from that list, I believe, a year ago. But for a long time, it was still on that list. And there are a lot of things where there are discussions about, you know, how high your markers can be during the test, and is it reasonable to test for as thoroughly as they are doing. We all remember the discussion about John Jones with the where we had minimal traces in his blood that were left over from years ago and stuff. So it is really, really a complex topic. And to ban someone for 4 years because he has taken maybe a wrong supplement or what the fuck, right? Is I mean, I think it's not okay. So I'm with Scott Rudman here. Should he have clarified what he meant during this interview with the Telegraph? Yeah, maybe. But bottom line is, I think he's right. I think he's fucking right. But yeah, you can write in the comments what you think. You can write in the comment what you think. Yeah, that's it for Glory. What more? What happened? Oh yeah, we have some UFC fights coming up this weekend. UFC free time is finally over. Thank God. Great main event. Giga Chikadze versus Kelvin Kattar. A great fight. But Chikadze obviously is already looking to his next opportunity and wanted to jump in against Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 171. He is without an opponent as Max Holloway has injured himself during training and is now looking for a new opponent. And a lot of people were knocking on the door of the UFC wanting to jump in against the featherweight champion, including Henry motherfucking Cejudo, who, of course, is an Olympic gold medalist and a champ as well, but not a champ, or not a champ, hasn't been a champ in the featherweight class. He was holding world titles in bantam and flyweight, and to be honest, he has a size of a flyweight as well. Now, Volkanovski, he isn't, the biggest featherweight himself, but should still have a reasonable weight and power advantage. Still, I would love to fucking see that fight. So, Henry Cejudo comeback against Volkanovski, the featherweight fight. And just imagine the guy gets in there and wins. Now, he's the champ. The first triple champ in the UFC. That would be unprecedented. That would be huge. I would love to see that fight. You can write in the comments, in the chat, if you wanted to see it. I would love to. Fucking love to. Yeah, and that's it basically. Gonna be back on Friday with another live stream. We're gonna be looking forward to the UFC fight night. As I said, Calvin Kattar versus Giga Chikadze. We'll look into a couple of the fights on the card. A lot of great fights on that card. And we'll talk about the news that come out during the week. Thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. Thanks for following. Hit that follow button. Let those 5 followers explode to, let's say, 15 or 50 or whatever. And let's help grow this channel. I'd like to do this 1 or 2 times during the week and build a nice community. The way we handle this on the fighting platform and YouTube on our German podcast is we're interacting a lot with the people in the chat, with our community, because this is the main thing I love about this whole social media shit. We can get in touch with you guys at home and have a real conversation during those live streams. I fucking love that. So make sure to hit that follow button. Make sure to, you know, to say your piece in the live chat and participate in this whole thing. Thank you very much for watching. Stay healthy and see you on Friday.